Hi there, my name is Jackie van Staden. I'm a clinical psychologist with Pretoria Psychologists in Sunnyside. Today we're going to be talking about hyperactivity and attention deficit disorders. It's known as ADHD. And because it's the beginning of the year, and so many youngsters are just starting out school for the first time, many parents might be hearing from teachers, "Oh, your child can't concentrate," or "Your child is disruptive," or "Your child is in an air bubble somewhere. They just daydream all the time." And what are you as a parent supposed to do? And somewhere along the line, when you speak to somebody else, you're going to hear the term ADHD. It stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And what it looks like is basically 18 criteria divided into two groups. The first 9 criteria are all about inattention, and the second 9 are all about hyperactivity, impulsivity. This is what they look like. The first criteria is you might have difficulty, in fact often have difficulty, sustaining attention in tasks or in play activities. This is about the child that can stay focused. No matter what they're doing, they can't hang in there until it's done. After a few minutes, they've started thinking about something else, started doing something else. Okay, so the first criteria is often has difficulty sustaining attention in tasks or play activities. The second one doesn't listen when spoken to directly. This is about the child who has to be called several times in order to get their attention. It's about that child who's in a bubble, who's daydreaming, isn't focused, isn't in the here and now, isn't present. So the second criteria is often doesn't seem to listen when spoken to directly. The third one is about not following through on instructions, failing to finish, be it schoolwork, be it chores, be it work in the office, even for adults. Often doesn't follow through or fails to finish. And you're going to see this when a child has to copy from the blackboard and you see the remark in his book saying, "Unfinished work." This is what it's all about. The next criteria is about having a disorganized child. Often has difficulty organizing tasks and activities. Things are always in a mess. Somebody is always late. Or when they're late, they have a million excuses. It's never their hassle. And things are always in a mess. If you open a child's backpack, and a little while ago I saw a mother who said she's bought umpteen lunch boxes trying to keep the sandwiches in the lunchbox, but in fact they all end up all over his books. So that criteria is about organization. The next one is the child often avoids, dislikes, or is reluctant to engage in tasks that require sustained mental effort. In other words, if it's going to take too long, or if it's going to take a lot of work, I don't want to do it. and they simply forget. Or they only remember on Monday when they're supposed to go to school. If it looks like it's going to take too long or a lot of effort, they don't want to do it. The next criteria is the child often loses things necessary for tasks or activities. And this could be rulers or pencils or erasers or shoes and jerseys. That's a classic. A child coming home without his jersey. So it's losing things, not being able to keep track of my possessions. The next one is about staying focused on what I'm doing, basically, but it's being distracted by any noise outside. If a child's doing their homework, the worst thing you can do is turn on the TV, because that will immediately get their attention and take it off of what they're doing, their homework. So this one is about the child who's easily distracted by things happening outside of what he's doing. And the last criteria in this category is about children who are forgetful. This is about the child who has to be reminded to brush his teeth every morning, or polish his shoes, or change his clothes and hang them up when he comes home. It's just such an effort to try to remember. So this is basically about the child that has to be reminded. Okay. These are the criteria now for the attention deficit section of the diagnosis. The next 9 are about hyperactive impulsive presentation. And here we have number 1, the first one, the child who fidgets, who can't sit still, who's always squirming around in his seat and fidgeting with his hands or picking up things that are lying around and playing with them. This is what drives a poor teacher crazy. The second one is the child that often leaves his seat when remaining seated as expected. He just gets up and walks around the classroom. Doesn't want to stay in his seat. As parents, you're going to see this when you go to church, for example, as a family. This is the child that wants to go every 10 minutes to the toilet, or has to play outside with his friends. When remaining seated is expected, this is the person that cannot stay in his seat. The next criteria in the hyperactive impulsive presentation is the child who runs about and climbs a lot. And it's quite excessive. It's inappropriate. Look, children run about and they play a lot, and they climb and they're all over the place, but this is over the top. This is the child who doesn't stop. He's always running around and climbing on things and knocking things over. But interestingly enough, in adolescence and in adulthood, people have learned not to do this because it's totally unacceptable. So in adolescence and in adulthood, this is that sense of restlessness, of being keyed up all the time. The next criteria is they often have difficulty playing quietly. It's when you walk in your front door and you can always hear where your child is, in which room they're playing, because they can't play quietly. It's very, very noticeable. It's not just chatting or hearing the radio playing. This is about the child who's screeching and laughing and shouting at somebody always making a noise. The next one is about the child who's always on the go. He acts like he's driven by a motor. A few years ago, we had that advert on TV about the Duracell bunny, that after all the other bunnies were lying down, the Duracell bunny was still going. Well, this is the Duracell bunny. This is the child that doesn't stop until he literally falls over. The next criteria is about the child who doesn't stop talking. He talks excessively. Non-stop, doesn't matter what he says, he's talking. Asking questions, always having something to say. The next one is about the child who blurts out answers before the questions have even been completed. Again, this inability to control the impulse to answer. I've got to be noticed, I've got to be seen, I've got to be heard. So this is the child that blurts out the answers before the questions have been completed. Cannot wait his turn. That's another very important aspect of impulse control. Cannot wait his turn. If there's sweets to be had, he wants to be the first in the row. And the last of the criteria in this category, the hyperactive impulsive category, is a child who interrupts and intrudes on others. He butts into conversations or games. As a parent, if you're talking on the phone, he's got to know who you're talking to. And can you say hello to Granny as well? Yeah. Very, very intrusive. And quite often, you're going to get that complaint from a teacher as well, that he's disruptive and intrusive. Okay. So now you have all of the 18 criteria. The first 9 are about inattention. The second 9 are about hyperactive impulsive presentation. And then, if you have more than 6 in each category, we call it a combined presentation. In other words, it's not just ADHD predominantly inattentive presentation, or ADHD predominantly hyperactive presentation. It's ADHD combined presentation. Well, that's all for today. We've got to our time limit looking at us. But next time we're together, what I'm going to do is talk to you about where does ADHD come from. Bye now.